There we are. So welcome to our third evening of Being the Change. And there's something that has been the change that we want to own. We called these strategy discussions, and we recognize that we haven't really held space for discussions and input. And we hadn't practiced what we're bringing tonight, although we've talked through stuff, and everything that we've said is stuff that we've also said in the last 6 months together. But I guess there was something a bit unconscious for myself of how much we wanted to share and how long it would all take. And so these haven't been as discussion-y as we hoped or envisioned that they would be. And so there's a mismatch in what we communicated and what has actually been happening. And so I'll say clearly now that tonight is, again, it's going to be more of a strategy talk, presenting thoughts and the potential direction of travel and approach to strategizing. As Being the Change Affinity Network, we're not in a place to do onboarding, or we're not a group that is launching. We don't have that infrastructure or those decisions in place. So what we're doing with these evenings is just putting out there our thoughts and the places that we've been exploring, hoping that this will plant seeds and open spaces for dialogue. At the same time, we know how much the breakouts were valued and have been desired. And so we've got a couple in for tonight. And I think, but even with that, the breakouts that we'll have tonight are more places for an exhaling, right? There's a lot of information that comes, and then there's a, whoa, something has to get out. So I'm not promising for us to be in full conversation, and yet there's a desire that we will have those conversations. And we were talking earlier about having a session a couple of weeks from now, something like that, that is much more of the discussion, because it's not that we are the experts and we have got everything sorted. It's that this whole community needs to be talking, and we need to be into conversation with the global south, the global majority. Like, the strategizing is something that we're all going to do together. But yes, to put that really there, that we do want to have the discussions, and we want the input, and we want to hear from you and discuss together with you and harvest the richness of the soils and the seeds that we've been tending. Okay, having said that, I'm going to go to screen sharing. Here we are again for the third night, and the logistics, so chat to me or Luke for any tech issues, including saying, like, if there's a slide up and somebody's talking and the slide's been up long enough for it to be read and you want to see the speaker talking, message me and I'll stop screen sharing. And yeah, that's helpful. I appreciate that. Again, we're recording, we'll send it out. We've got the Q&A link. Fourth one, don't be distracted by the chat. Self-regulate. If you find yourself getting pulled into stuff in the chat that isn't quite working or is agitating or bringing stuff up for you, turn it off. There's how you turn it off. Or just, yeah, tune out so you can be with the listening, with the talking, because it can be really off-putting. But it's got to be with you. You've got to, well, I call you to self-regulate and to be with yourself around the chat. Take notes. We'll have, yeah, a couple of breaks, pauses, and breakouts.
Yeah, I also just want to quickly say I do appreciate some of the stuff that does go in chat. Sometimes it is like really nice to feel connected and know how things are landing, and have that too when it's a positive thing.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks. So a brief recap. We're aiming for a paradigm shift to reshape thousands of years of human patterning. The paradigm has feedback loops that reinforce and stabilize its continuation. Scarcity, separation, and powerlessness linked to the domination paradigm also known as patriarchy, or sometimes called patriarchy, from which colonization spread around the world. To understand the paradigm, understand how humans function. And so we brought in the polyvagal theory, brain hemispheres, trauma, etc. And for us to learn how to settle ourselves and settle as communities together. We named the paradigm with several names: Yurugu, Wetiko, whiteness, etc. And we brought that humankind is in places, that doesn't make sense, does it? Humankind is in places and can be a keystone species to bring more aliveness in life. I think you get the gist. I hope you get the gist. We can be humankind, right? We don't have to be this thing that kills everything it touches. We can be a species that brings life. So today we're covering where to look for inspiration and where we've been looking, relationships and repair, attraction forces and growing magic source, being the Change Affinity Network examples, how we stop the harm. And then again, we have some discussions, questions, and space for Q&A. And with that, I'm passing over to Skeena. Is Skeena here, and is Skeena co-host yet? I'm not sure if I've done that.
Don't think yet.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm here. I'm definitely here. Hello, welcome, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Some of you I know have been here for the 3 nights running. Some of you maybe just tonight. So I want to share this moment. Again, we've been building momentum, and I'm going to build momentum around this piece tonight, or a finale even for our 3 sessions around the heart, and just say, look, that, you know, when we talk about this paradigm shift, many people in non-Western cultures have recognized that this shift involves a heart shift, like a consciousness shift that perhaps involves a change in heart set rather than mindset. And so what does this mean for us here in the cultures that we're in here and the dominant culture that we're in here? How do we, as Dalai Lama says, he says quite ferociously actually in one of his talks, you know, come on the West, develop your heart, develop the heart. He says it vehemently. How do we do that? How do we develop the heart? It's so simple, and I'm going to just run you through a heart coherence practice that is that it's about us being in our hearts and leaning into the power that is there, that, as Rumi says, the strength and gentleness and tenderness of the heart that can bring forth a more integrated wisdom. So this is an invitation, and maybe you just do the first stage as we've been doing the last 2 nights, to decenter the screen. If that's enough for you, sometimes I'm going to do a breathing practice with you. Sometimes it's too much for us to do a breathing practice. And you'll know if that feels too much. So maybe you're just decentering the screen and you're connecting again with something that feels a good connection point for you, that your heart appreciates. So again, I'm just looking out at the grass and just sensing that I have much gratitude and appreciation for the feeling of grass, for its purpose, its life force. I love the grass. And then if you want to come with me on the next stage of this heart coherence practice, then you could, I invite you to place your hand on your heart, a hand. And as you do that, becoming aware of the greatness and the magnificence of your heart. So bringing your focus to your heart. And as we do that, you could now imagine, if you want to come with me further, you could imagine that your heart is breathing. So your heart is your breathing piece. So this heart is inhaling and this heart is exhaling. Your heart, your beautiful heart. And as your heart inhales and exhales, it's slowing down this breath. And if you want to come with me further, then it's a coherent breath. So you're breathing out for 5 through your heart. And you're breathing in for 5 into your heart. So your heart is breathing this coherent, even breath. This is a restorative breath practice. And as you do that, once again, you're remembering what you love and appreciate. So the heart's memory is being triggered. The good memories, the light memories. Let your heart remember whatever it wishes to in the breath, in the even breath. Keep the breath. If you're here with this at 5 in and 5 out. And you can feel maybe as you appreciate and remember what the heart loves to remember. A glow, a warmth, a sparkle in your chest. The heart's enjoying this. And it's radiating, its electricity is growing. And maybe 1 or 2 more ins and outs. Inhale and exhale. And then when you're ready, you can take your hand away. The heart's still warm. You can slowly bring yourself back to the screen. And we've just breathed ourselves back to life from the heart. And that's a practice that, when used regularly, increases your heart rate variability. And what that means is the flexibility of your heart, the flexibility of your heart. So useful for these times. That's the developing of the heart. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next slide. Oh gosh, how could I forget? Gail's just reminded me, thank goodness, to light our children's fire. So Gail, can you hold again though? So this is what we've been doing every evening to remember the life force and that we are here in service to the life and love of the next 7 generations of all species. So we light this candle, we light this fire that lives in us in honor of that. It's lit, it's lit. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Next slide. And I think, is it our Esther? Our
Yeah.
Esther.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Hi, greetings everyone. So I'm just going to share a few words about the need for us to think about the land, indigeneity, and also motherism. So we were talking yesterday about some of the origins of this polycrisis that we're facing today, and looking at how do we address it, and how do we best address it. And so in that context, land is really key. And for many African heritage, Aboriginal and Indigenous cultures, land is not about property and natural resources and extraction and exploitation of land. Land basically encompasses culture, relationships, ecosystems, social systems, spirituality, and also law. And for many of us, land means Mother Earth. It represents our connection. It means the water, the air, all are more than human beings as well, and all that live and interact in these ecosystems. And we see land as being something that is on sacred trust from our Creator. Land being also the giver of life. And so land is very key to many strategies that African, Aboriginal, Indigenous, and other peoples actually embrace when it comes to tackling the polycrisis, and certainly what is currently referred to as the climate and ecological crisis. And in our own work as Being the Change, we've been very, very interested in how we can also support and amplify the voices of many communities of resistance who are defending land for this very reason. And that then links us to the whole issue of why we're concerned about land. Apart from strategies to tackle climate and ecological crisis, it's also because we have within our network campaigns like the Stop the Manganese campaign, Stop the Manganese Recharge Genocide Ecocide campaign, there is a recognition that ecocide and the large-scale destruction of natural ecosystems can also amount to genocide of peoples. And so we're very concerned with how do we stop this harm of today. That's why we emphasize stopping the manganese and supporting, as I said, communities of resistance in the global south, especially working with allied networks like Extinction Rebellion Internationalist Solidarity Network and the Extinction Rebellion Internationalist Solidarity Network Global South partners, of which there are 3. There's XRANA, the XR Affinity Network of Asia, there's XRAN, the XR Affinity Network of Africa, and also XRISE, the Affinity Network for Abya in particular. And so that leads me then to talk about indigeneity, because indigeneity is really about connecting with one's ancestry and all that your people have made sense of in terms of how we relate to our Mother Earth in the particular place that we call home. Humans, plants, animals, ecosystems, and all of that. And so for us, this is really, really key. And one of the things that colonization has done has sever and disrupt the relationships that peoples have had with that part of Mother Earth that we have come to call home and develop relationship with. And it's hard for us to kind of be who we are and caretake and become stewards again when our connections to lands have been so severely disrupted. And so what you find is that many Indigenous, Aboriginal peoples, African peoples as well, nationhood and restoration of nationhood, connections to land and self-determination are really, really key strategies in tackling the climate and ecological crisis and other aspects of the polycrisis, because it is about fighting for the right to restore our relationship once again with that particular land that we have come to call home. And so this climate and ecological crisis is really a crisis, an existential crisis that really goes to the heart of our very existence. And it's more problematic and more devastating for those peoples who are currently still living on lands where settler colonialism exists. Now, we know that indigenous communities make up less than 5% of the world's population, but they also protect 80% of global biodiversity. And so land back has become a key demand, campaign and strategy of many indigenous communities of resistance. And in fact, the slide that we see here is from the Unistoten territory in the land currently called Canada. And this is an indigenous camp where they've reclaimed this land in that part of the country that is now called Canada, known as the Wet'suwet'en land. And through our connections in Being the Change, especially Global Majority Versus campaign, we've also been supporting members of that campaign who have been back to the land in Mexico and been part of the struggles of indigenous peoples to reclaim lands that have been stolen, basically, and is being misappropriated by corporations such as the Bonafont water plant. And so really what we are embracing and what we are doing is supporting those struggles, amplifying their voices of resistance as a way of being the change, because this is essential for rebuilding and reconnecting with land so that we can become stewards and caretakers again. And finally, that leads me to the whole point about motherism. Because of the way in which many of us view land as a mother, that it's really about you know, also elevating those knowledge systems that have been shaped that promote this connection again. Because how do you ill-treat your mother? How do you abuse your mother? How do you abuse, in fact, any close relation? And so it's about how do we restore the knowledges that communities have been working with and apply that in our campaigning efforts today. So I particularly embrace the term motherist, as has been promoted by an African scholar, activist called Professor Catherine Ochonolo. And for Professor Ochonolo, the motherist is the woman, man, or other person committed to the survival and maintenance of Mother Earth as a hologrammatic entity, and someone who embraces also that human struggle. So that struggle to reconnect us, restore our right relationships, and restore equilibrium. And so these are some of the key aspects that we felt are really, really important to embrace within our strategy processes, because it's part of actually not only stopping the harm, but pointing to how we can engage in transformative adaptations, but also restore and repair our right relationships with our Mother Earth and all of our relations, including more than human, those, the plants, the animals, and all aspects of both the living entities that have to coexist on land and share space, but also those that have moved into other realms. So I'll leave it here. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Just this quote I thought was really appropriate to just reground us in that recognition, and why we feel it's important to draw from and share knowledges about different approaches to how we connect to land. And this quote from Professor Wangari Maathai: "We are all Earth's children, and we should treat her as our mother. Today, we are faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humanity stops threatening its life support system. We are called to assist the earth to heal her wounds and in the process heal our own. Indeed, to embrace the whole of creation in all its diversity, beauty and wonder. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Beautiful. So can we talk about sacredness? What do we mean by sacredness? So I think what I mean today is that life is precious. Sacredness, meaning that there's something precious here that we're acting in protection of, as Polly Higgins, my dear late friend, said, you know, she coined the term earth protectors, we're life protectors. And it's then it's sacred work, right? So when Hafiz says now is the time to know that all you do is sacred, that's what I feel us doing and becoming, and what we've been doing in our time with Extinction Rebellion. And Wendell Berry says there are no unsacred places, just sacred places and desecrated places. So the word sacred will mean many things to us in our manyness, in our differences, in our diversity. And it comes through in different forms with different cultural leanings and transformations of that word. And it's not easy for some, that word isn't easy for some, but I want for a moment to think about the water as being sacred and looking at sacredness through that lens of water. And one of the teachings of the Standing Rock elders was to say, water is life. If we don't respect our waters, then life will not thrive. And also Charles Eisenstein, he talks about, and I think Gail mentioned it, looking at this story through the lens of the water paradigm rather than the carbon paradigm, because maybe it's more meaningful. And I want to talk about just for a moment also that what water in this paradigm, in the domination paradigm, what's happening to it. It's soon to be the most commercialized product in the world, believe it or not. By 2023, the water market is expected to be worth 900 billion. And by the way, it would just take 150 billion, just 16% of that profit, to make clean water available to all. It's the single most impactful thing in that way that we could do to improve health outcomes in the global majority world. And I want to remember that one of the meetings we had very early on, Roman and I attended, was a meeting with a whistleblower from the government who was sharing with us that about what has happened with the privatization of reservoirs in this country and what a huge issue that is for water security in this country. We don't own our waters, right? And what a fundamental part of adaptation, transformative adaptation that Esther was talking to, that it would be so important in order to restore life, that we would be coming back to being in relationship and being able to restore our local water cycles and having access to our own waters on our own lands. I just want to mention Julian Jones for a moment, because that's his work, restoring local water cycles, and his contact will be in the seed pod. I'm going to then just for a moment look at from Kashmir, from my land of heritage, the water cycle there, and why I'm talking about it as a lens. And if I think about what's happening to the water cycle there and how it's being disrupted, so one of the reasons Kashmir is so biodiverse and has this exceptionally great biodiversity is because it's made up of many waters, many different ways of water, lakes, wetlands, rivers, mountain streams, waterfalls, and ice scapes. And they've been totally disrupted. They've been totally disrupted. there's been damming and deforestation. What disrupts our water cycles? Damming, the deforestation, the disruption of our oceans and the temperature disruption there of our oceans. And this sacred piece, you know, water carries, if you think about a river that's become dry, the parchment, the cracked riverbed, right? It's lost its memory. It's lost its memory for life. And I feel like that's a symbol of what's happening in a dehydration process and a disruption of our water cycle. We're losing our memory for life. And I just want to connect it with the polyvagal system as well, because the polyvagal system could also be a picture of this place where the waters in our body gets disturbed. I've been thinking about this again with Gabriel Cram, that we, in our fight and flight, there's like a steam state. And in the freeze, there's the freeze state. And we need to be in flow. And we're not, you know, the physiological body, the flows of our own water body are deeply disturbed. So we're all, there's fractals again of how this lives out in us and how this is living out in the world. And again, you know, if you want more Charles Eisenstein, it will be in the seed pod to watch his little 15 minutes about the water paradigm and what that means. And then just to finish this with saying a beautiful story from Pat McCabe about the waters and the sacredness of the waters. She tells a story that some years ago, there was a rain season that brought on a flood, and she saw the waters rising as they came down the valley, and she was scared. She was scared. Was her home going to go underwater? So she went out to the waters and said, "Sister Water," something like this. I'm not going to tell it exactly as beautifully as she will. "Sister Water, what is it that you need? I want to listen to you. What is it that you need?" And the waters said something to her like, we just want relationship. We want relationship, and we want our sacred connection back. We want to be heard. We want to be in dialogue with you. Please tell your people. Please tell your people this. Please share this with your people. So she did, and she went to, she went off. She had that moment with the waters as they were rising, and she went off to do some work away from her house. And when she returned, the waters that she was sure were going to come and flood her house had split into two streams. And she says it that she believes that was because she was able to connect, and that she had this moment, right, of message through the water as to what's needed now for our repair of our relationship with all that lives, with all that is sacred, all that is precious. Thank you. So next slide. Kofi, over to you, love.
Can I just give a reminder to all speakers to just keep a line of communication open with me? Just I'll use the chat unless you tell me another way, but we are 12 minutes over, so I need to be able to give you timing help. Over to you, Kofi. Thanks.
Yeah. Communities actually cannot survive without developing cultures that root them within their own natural environment. So authentic culture is a way of life of communities developed within and in accord with their natural environment, and with due respect to Mother Earth, and particularly that part they call homeland. And it takes the system of colonization, for example, to rob people of their cultures as a way of dominating them. And in fact, in National Liberation and Culture, a very popular essay written by one of our foremost Pan-African freedom fighters, Dr. Amilcar Cabral, he goes to explain why to colonized peoples, culture is essentially, a weapon of their struggle for emancipation. And that is why colonized and other oppressed peoples actually, for their very survival, have to try not only to defend their own cultures wherever they are, including those that are, for example, African people have been forcibly torn away from the continent and dispersed, in various parts of the world, clinging on to their culture, holding on to who they truly are and what they carry within themselves in terms of the natural environment that has shaped, their lives for many, many, many generations. And to do so, we have to develop forms of cultural resistance, and with that build, zones of freedom, even under systems of oppression wherever that is imposed upon them. And it is through culture that oppressed peoples actually begin, to become the change. And by necessity, being the change is the way they have to live and survive under systems of oppression. Because every day they have to battle to ensure that they try and create even oases of freedom for their very survival. And for us, for example, we, even in XR and taken into XR in the space that we call the XR International Solidarity Network, we have had to listen and work with our Global South diasporan communities, and through them, communities in the Global South, in the majority world of the Global South, to develop the program that we call Ubuntu Pashavidia, that actually seeks to bring together and harmonize the cultures of resistance of particularly indigenous communities in Africa, in Asia, in Abya-Yala, or the so-called Americas. And that's kind of globally connecting cultures of resistance and trying to amplify those cultures in the resistance that we are developing in the diaspora of the global north from the global south is an essential part of us being the change in also here, and making communities here actually recognize our humanity, but also our insistence on, upholding our connection to Mother Earth on our own terms of self-determination. And when we get into spaces where there is disrespect for our cultures, for our ways of being, for our perspectives, for what we our people for generations upon generations have tried to uphold as their way of connecting with their own special way of connecting with Mother Earth, it actually amounts to to genocide. And people forget that, even in the original legal formulations of the concept of genocide into law, an essential part of it is cultural genocide. Because when you rob a people of their culture and you deny them the right to assert themselves and live their ways, through their own culture, and you seek to make them something else other than what, they are collectively as a people, you actually are committing genocide. And one of the things people find hard to understand, even within XR, is that any attempt to force us to see the world and to live and even engage in activism outside of our cultures, is actually contributing to genocide and ecocide against our peoples. And it is important, therefore, that in building the kind of relationships where we can be the change, there is mutual respect for each and every people's cultures and their ways, of being. This is nothing new. In fact, in this country, many people have tried, even from communities racialized as white, have tried to overcome the fear of the other, particularly the demonization of other cultures, to reach out to people and try to respect them as who they are, defined by their own cultures. And the names again are legion, but I can't help mentioning, for example, June Mill, Roger Douglas, who worked with Kwame Nkrumah on promoting his own ideas about conscientism. But there's also Basil Davidson, a wonderful British historian of Africa who has written enormously about this. And I'll leave it there, that if you really, really, want to get onto this journey of being the change, culture as a weapon of resistance, but also intercultural relationship building locally, is what will root our rebellion, in global justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kofi. Over to you, Skinner.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, love.
To make it the big one there.
Yeah, great. I'm just wanting to see you all again.
We can't see you right now. The video's up.
Yeah, just distorting that. Thank you. So relationships. So in our title, Being the Change, we've got relate, repair, rebel, and it's not an accident that we started with relate, because we think this comes back to relationships. And so to recap, what's happened to our relationships, what's been happening. And so Ian McGilchrist's work, why did we talk about that? Because, well, what has happened in the domination of the left hemisphere in this culture which creates a rationalist culture, and it creates an asymmetrical, unbalancing outcomes as the solutions. It also chooses bureaucrats and managers and sociopaths as leaders, right? That's what we're seeing, who keep designing the domination paradigm. And something about when we live primarily from the left hemisphere, a tragedy around our relationship occurs. Because what we do, relationships are so subtle, right? But we dismiss ambiguity. Feelings are more shallow, right? The left hemisphere does very shallow ways of feeling. Happiness becomes hedonistic, relationships superficial, nature other, intuition mistrusted, and love suspected. It's a tragedy. Why? So, I'm just going back to Gail saying, well, why? We can just keep saying why to try and understand the roots of this. And we talked about the nature of human beings in the why, going, well, for example, Dr. Robin Rudin says, well, we're stuck in our number one fear. For human beings, the number one fear is the fear of abandonment. We're stuck in this feeling alone, and we think separation's real. That's why. That's why. So Darshan Ovaris goes, well, yeah, why? Oh, okay. So the evolved nest, this way of being with each other that's existed since hunter-gatherer times, that's been destroyed. So there's the why of what's happened to our relationships. But then we can go, okay, so what causes, and this is our rise, right? What causes flourishing? Relationships do, right? Deep relationships cause flourishing. And what causes that? Well, connection. And then it's a virtuous circle of life. So in that, we can think about, so next slide, love, please. So being here, I said, being the change in relating means us actively protecting the dignity, stability, integrity, vitality, and beauty between us and the whole of life. Oh, just a breath there. And then Mickey Cashton, who's been one of the mentors for the co-liberation work, she says, reconnecting and moving away from the dominant paradigm and towards a new paradigm of relationship requires us to share our needs and feelings with vulnerability, mourning, humility, and tenderness. So the coming back into relationship requires the vulnerability, the mourning, humility, and tenderness. And I want to just say something again that reminds us of where we've been with, for one of the theories we've been with, which was polyvagal theory. And the fascinating thing is that intimacy, deep connection, is a blended state of dorsal vagal, that annihilation feeling, that feeling of really being very, very vulnerable, and ventrovagal, the loved up state, right? The connection state. It's a blended state of both. So it's a vulnerable place to be, and it creates intimacy. It creates a deep connection, right? So we can think about this also with Arne Nace's deep ecology. So when he says, there is deep ecology rests in a comprehensive maturity of all relationships. What he's saying is that our work now is to come into deep relationship with the mountains, the streams, the birds, the bees, they're all our relations, right? They're all our relations. And that our survival depends on that, coming into deep relationship. So one last thing is this, the biology of love, and to say something around how amazing I feel the frame of birth is. Valerie Kaur, who's an amazing thinker in terms of what is revolution, what does revolution take? She says, what if this was the darkness of the womb rather than the darkness of the tomb? And how, if you look at, if this is a near-death experience, as Cassandra Wheaton said, if we look at what we're in possibly as a rebirth, then those hormones in birth, oxytocin and vasopressin, just keep tracking ahead. In a birth that goes well, they keep tracking ahead of cortisol, yeah, the fear body. They just keep tracking ahead. And that's what we need to do. We just need to keep tracking ahead, the love ahead of the fear. And then we're ready, we're contracting and expanding for this rebirth of deep relationships. Thank you. So, next slide.
Okay, so that's that's back to me, what it means to repair. So repair being the preferred term, but what's also becoming more and more commonplace is to hear talk of reparations, but we're using the term repair because that is really the root of what that word reparations means. And we know that to repair is about restoring, renewing, and also transforming harm, damage, injustice. Now, we've been talking a lot about the communities that we've been working with concretely, the importance of the co-liberation and the learning, the action learning. And I'm reminded by the works of an indigenous Yaqui scholar called Professor Rebecca Tosi, who teaches us that there's no uniform theory or approach or praxis or methodology of what repair means, but certainly from the perspective of indigenous peoples and I would say African heritage communities, repair has to embrace the indigenous epistemologies of that particular group who has been affected by colonization and dispossession and utilizes it in their own sort of strategies and tactics. Now, that being said, repair also entails the restoration and renewal of our knowledges, our indigenous knowledges of art and symbolism, of language, of music, philosophy, science and technology, and spirituality. So there needs to be a kind of renewing of even the way in which we think about what it is that we're tackling and how best we tackle it. And so that then leads me to talk very concretely about some of the work that some of us of African heritage have been doing around repair and how this links to the repair not only of other peoples who have been colonized, but also who are domestically colonized. And I was observing the chat, you know, what's going on even in terms of the United Kingdom and the various colonizations that have gone on with nations within the United Kingdom, as well as those around the world. But for us, repair is essentially about a word that we are promoting and doing research on as well to look at how other people are using it. And that term is rematriation. Now, rematriation is a term that is often deployed by indigenous peoples of Abya Yala, the so-called Americas, to characterize the actions needed to heal the structural and epistemic violence suffered by these peoples of experienced colonization and who have been disconnected from the land and also the epistemologies of repair and transformation of their forebears. It envisions the restoration of a living culture to its rightful place on Mother Earth. So not a culture of dispossession and separation and despoilation, but a culture of healing those wounds of separation as well. And so rematriation is really how we connect back, how we get back on the land, how we restore those rightful relationships. So this is not theoretical. This is actually how we are framing our intergenerational strategy and tactics around effecting and securing holistic repair. And this is not just about African people and indigenous peoples and Aboriginal people. The notions that we are working with is that we recognize that it's not just us who've been harmed, other peoples have also been harmed, and also the way in which we relate to Mother Earth and the animals and the plants have also been harmed. And so the damage that has been done and the repair that needs to be happening has to be repair of people and planet. And so we uniquely promote a notion, a holistic notion of repair that embraces all of that. And it's referred to as planet repairs. And this basically refers to when safeguarding the rights of past, present, and future generations, there is a need to proceed from a standpoint of pluriversality that highlights the nexus of reparatory, environmental, and cognitive justice in articulating the need to repair holistically our relationship with and inseparability from Mother Earth, the environment, and the pluriverse, giving due recognition to indigenous knowledges in contrast with Western-centric Enlightenment ideals that separated humanity from nature and thereby justified exploitation for capital accumulation. Where have we taken this? We've been working with political parties, cross-party, but in particular with the Green Party of England and Wales, who have embraced this notion of repair. It resulted in motions that have been passed in London councils and by Bristol City Council that actually are initiating this conversation and dialogue at the local level to engage in change making from the ground up, because we're tired of waiting to central government to do something about this question of repair. And this way it's about linking communities in struggle, in resistance. So it's not about putting communities against each other and having an oppression Olympics about who has suffered more, but it's about how are we all interconnected in this web of life, and how do we all have a stake in actually stopping the disrepair, okay, and being part of the repair, and then actually living our vision for a transformed world order. This has resulted in the Stop the Manganese campaigns, proposal for the establishment of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry for Truth of Imperative Justice being embraced. There's been a recent setting up of an all-party parliamentary group for African reparations, which promotes this particular approach to planet repair and is in dialogue with other peoples who have also experienced colonization. And we are all similarly somehow interconnecting our struggles. So not only do we recognize our struggle, which is known as the International Social Movement for African Reparations, there's also a recognition of the wider internationalist, what's called People's Reparations International Movement. And where are we heading to? For us concretely, it is about a repaired, not only Africa, but it's a repaired world, because we know that you cannot be a repaired people by yourself. We don't live on the moon. We're living on planet Earth, Mother Earth. And we also have a responsibility to ensure that our struggle for repair catalyzes the repair struggles of all other peoples, including those peoples of Europe who have been dispossessed. And that way we link many of those movements, global justice, social, ecological justice movements that are trying to be the change. And that's where we build the critical mass. Our vision for this repaired, post-repair world order is known as Ubuntu Dunia. And that is basically taking that sort of, maxim around, multiple worlds. The fact that we are co-creating multiple worlds of coexistence. And so Ubuntu Dunia is based on Ubuntu, the Bantu speaking notion of humanity in interconnectedness. And a dunia is really a multipolar world of global justice for all, not just humans, all those who are more than human as well, all our relations. And this is the wording, these are the strategies, this is the language, this is what we're using and embracing in our organizing efforts. As African heritage campaigns, linking with internationalist campaigns, working with other movements of different colonized peoples as well, and linking us back on the continent of Africa. And so there is the Matubuntu Mital Gafrik, which is a formation that we're working with on the continent of Africa, where people in Africa are also engaging in these repairs, defying these colonial borders that separate us and call us all these different modern identities and nationalities, but linking with similar struggles of peoples in Asia, in Abya Yala, in Europe, in Australasia and Oceania, the Pacific, who are engaged in similar actions. So that is our vision. And that is what we are working to. And it is something that even in our local organizing in the UK, we're developing what's known as Impamsio and Pango, which basically means planet repairs, alternative progression plans. And this is what we are embracing in our local, I should say, organizing, using this notion of what are we trying to restore? We're trying to restore our culturality, our reconnections to Mother Earth, healing these divides and separations between us as members of the human family, but also how that has impacted on the way that we relate to our other family members and relations. So I think I'll leave it there. I'll move on. Next slide for who is following me. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we've made it to a break. Breathe, move, take care of your water, make some notes, stretch, get up from the computer. We'll be back in, let's say 4 minutes, 6 minutes past. Okay, folks, then we are back. I'll just put that up. So welcome, I hope you've had a little bit of a break. I'm sorry the break might have felt a bit squeezed. Just to, I can see that several people are not yet back. So I'll speak to my my friends in Being the Change and just say, we need to trim time. Each of us is going just slightly over, which means that the overall session is going to be either expanded or we're going to have to cut things towards the end. So just to my co-facilitators and speakers, please try and keep things lean. In this next section, we'll be introducing some concepts, but those concepts have already been spoken to a little bit, some new words, etc. So as you speak, just be aware that they are already spoken to, and keep it as short as you can with just an example or something like that. I believe, is it Kobana who is up with global, what it means to organize globally? Aha,
Can you hear me now?
Go for it, Kobana.
All right then, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is just about an introduction to, again, what's been talked about as a way of working that's very much, again, not new. It's part of this intergenerational understanding that for those of us in the diaspora in particular who are forcibly growing up without access to our lands, understandings of, you know, where our people are, the realities of the situation on the ground, what we've been, you know, in our own communities, what we've been seeing as a significant part of our repair work, our reparations and our self-repairs, is to reconnect ourselves in our global Africanness. And in doing so, return ourselves to the power of our people's struggle for land and national liberation. So what does this mean practically here? Well, we've had to look at ways in which we can start to amplify and support, you know, visibility to what are ongoing struggles back home. And at the same time, you know, some of the things that have been missing is particularly from the specific type of activism that's been promoted outside, not been, you know, heard in XR, is how do we make this popular? You know, revolutions, changes are only going to happen on masses. They're only going to mobilize through our communities. It's only going to be ordinary peoples that are capable of delivering the changes that, you know, a tiny minority won't really achieve. So we have been part of one of the collectives that has been formed, is called the One Love Collective, and we host a global, you can see this one at Global Brixton Jam, a reparations jam, which is a music edutainment event, repairing both the institutions of music, which have been also colonized and damaged and made to be part of our genocide and ecocide through, you know, corrupting it and making it subject to, you know, peddling money for music and pointless time, to rescuing the best of our traditions of not only indigenous music, but also back to that time when our music was producing the movements that we all know and hark back to. We think about the likes of Miriam Makeba, Nina Simone, James Baldwin. What was it at this time when people's music and everything that we were producing in our culture was in service to our communities? It was in service to our movement. It was in service to our liberation. So One Love Collective has been occupying some space down in Brixton in order to challenge the lack of space and autonomous space for us to repair ourselves. And in doing that, building relationships with the support of our elders and long-term communities of resistance who are literally right now struggling to defend their indigeneity. The situation in parts of Accra, Ghana, is that you're growing up still being fed the same nonsense we get fed reaches home. So you can be growing up still being led to believe that your indigeneity, your culture is absolutely trash. You need to learn how to speak English. English is still being taught in all of the schools around, you know. You won't, if you want to be popular, if you want your music to connect with people, then you have to sound like a drill rapper from London. And so now one of the newest trends is actually to hear so much like drill on the continent. And that's strictly problematic. It shows the ability for us to already live locally and live in these dialogues, but how do we repair that and restore it to its role in terms of restituting and rebuilding our communities? So this is a practical way in which, you know, we've been trying to engage our community here around a space that we create where community can come together and at the same time hear stories from around the world. And now beginning a process of connecting One Love Collective with Mauna Visiha, this really powerful group of young Africans who are restituting the indigenous Ebe culture by, you know, playing that music, and them knowing that, you know, there are people here that want to support and wants to hear that because it's necessary for our liberation. And the second example, and so this is ongoing for those people that are in London, you're welcome to come and see what our resistance has been globally, and then hear from our Global South communities, from our people on the ground who are speaking into the Jam monthly through talks and telling us what's happening. And secondly, I know this is going over time, but tough, sorry, Luke, is this Ope Clara, because one of the things that's been a big wake-up call is that in the time that we're all, you know, trying to work, you know, there's this confusion in the environmental movement and what's really the direction. We know that the struggle is taking the lives of our people on a daily basis. In the time that this call has happened, you know, we know earth defenders, land defenders are being killed. And we need to not, you know, hide away from those truths and wake up to our role in humanity to hold hands and build those relationships. Last year, when Elom Kokudade, who's one of our GMVS PASAC members, who was promoting sustainable cycling as an alternative to Western maldevelopment, was killed on an accident on the road. We've sought then to, you know, continue to see how that legacy can be supported, because this happens on such a daily basis with no one to hear or no one to amplify that struggle, that it means that you have a situation where, you know, these deaths are just being allowed to happen. And it's just how dissuasive is it to people who are fighting for their lives and their struggles in their lands, when, you know, there's nothing there to catch you and to say, look, we know this struggle needs to continue. So Ope Clara is being promoted this year with members and people who are in the BCAN team to have a global annex here in the UK, where there will be a ride out for Elom, as well as getting diaspora media team to work on developing a documentary and a media thing to follow and learn about the history of what's been happening on the ground. So these things are going to go in tandem, and there's going to be a global ride out here to support the campaign and the Elom Justice Quest to seek a vision of a world when there is cycle lanes for all roads in Africa, and we can wean ourselves off of these maldevelopment lies. And so these are practical ways that we can start co-building and co-liberating, which means that it's not charity, it's what we do here is good for us, it's good for other people, and it's good for the liberation struggle to be strengthened and fortified. And yeah, following in terms of session 4 and practical things, these are things that we're actually inviting people into because they're open spaces. And there's much more besides, but you can start to see there is loads of ways that we are concretely building Matabuntu Man, or concretely building this new vision. And, you know, this is the direction that has been a long-term narrative. This is what the reparation struggle has been for centuries. Yet it's only now that we're hearing it as an XR in an XR space. So this is, you know, one of the reasons why, you know, there's so much to kind of get through, and these theories boil down into this. And to those that follow that, Global Brixton Jam is where you'll find more information. And there's a video that will be shared at the end of this meeting about one of the first comings together of a global celebration. Sorry for running over time.
Okay, so that's me. Pluriversality, why it matters to understand this. I did use that term when I spoke a short while ago. So pluriversality is basically a concept emerging from decolonial theory and praxis that provides a counter narrative to contemporary sort of Western-centric, Eurocentric assumptions of the universal. So in our XRISM perspective, we define pluriversality as a worldview that recognizes our planetary home of Mother Earth as a multipolar global village, world of many worlds, where each people have in the treasure house of their own indigenous knowledge systems, their own universal cosmovision for best articulating their own particularity in organic link with the generality of all life forms and everything else in nature, all of which interconnect and interact to creatively harmonize into a pluriversal world outlook of our full humanity in its beautiful Ubuntu richness of equitable unity in diversity as a whole, and in fact, we would say as a one love whole. And in fact, Kofi, when he spoke, when he mentioned Ubuntu Pacha Video as a practical application of pluriversality, Ubuntu Pacha Video, which is again something which XRISN has been promoting with our Global South Partner Networks, is really a global justice conceptual framework of intercultural communion for the principled internationalist solidarity defense of human peoples and Mother Earth rights by the globally unifying might of all communities of resistance. So the term Ubuntu, Pacha, Vidya has been coined in the global majority decolonizational light of cognitive justice from a combination of the indigenous African concept of Ubuntu, which is about recognizing and seeing one's humanity in the shared humanity of all peoples of the world, as well as the indigenous Abyayalan concept of Pachamama, meaning Mother Earth, and then the indigenous Asian concept of Vidya, meaning true knowledge. And so altogether, this really sort of adds up to sharing our common humanity in the all for one and one for all, one love embrace, true knowledge and invincible defense of our Mother Earth. And this is really a series of festivals and activities which promote communities of resistance, joyful rebellion, transformative rebellion, to be the change and to create the world that we're seeking to bring about. Thank you. Moving on to the next slide.
Thank you, Esther. I'll be short because of time. So one way of describing co-liberation, and this is what we've been a discovery of for the last 2 years, and it's been many years, right, that this has been thought about in many communities across the globe, is a moving from me, which is what this paradigm does, to we, to one. Something's happened to the slide. So I wanted to read that definition.
Sorry, I'm having a tech issue.
I can read it from my computer just to get things going. Thanks, Gail. So we've described it as the knowing, being and becoming that my safety, my freedom and my flourishing depend on yours and yours on mine, and at once on all life, with all life, I should say with all life. So it's giving another way of the Ubuntu Dunya and this expression around how we act as one for one, and in that embrace of one love and one heartedness. And back to Audre Lorde, I feel, therefore I am, and I am because we are, and we are because life is. And in that there's a praxis, and co-liberation is both a theory and a practice around how we co-liberate. What is co-liberating? You know, what are these forces where we can stand with each other in deep solidarity, right? Knowing that your cause is my cause, the wellness, your flourishing really does depend on mine. That's enough. Thank you. Moving on.
With these pictures in the background that actually we have developed into banners for use here, I would like to point to the question of power. And for us in the Stop the Manganese campaign in the Majority World International Solidarity Coordinating, Council of Communities of Resistance, which is a diaspora network we are building here for our communities of resistance from Africa, Asia, and Abiyala that are here. We talk about how we cannot just be engaging in protests for the extractivist establishment hooked on fossil fuels, to deliver change to us, and how we can locally work with communities of resistance in the global south, connected to those in the global north, so that we can build the power to be the change, and in that compel other powers to recognize the need for transformation. And this is really what occupies us. And so we work with communities of resistance, particularly in the global south, through, for example, these two women, Akofa and Eliquilin, who have been designated, for example, ambassadors of their own indigenous Betel nation in West Africa, with the emerging traditional leadership of our indigenous communities, like Osie Ajatepo, the 7th of Abatime. So to be able to give visibility here in the global north to the immense power of our communities of resistance in the global south, that very often gets ignored or marginalized in the work that many people do for environmental justice. And in fact, there is a real danger of tokenizing, these powerful forces in resistance in the majority world, where you have at functions they're invited to say prayers, do a little bit of a song and a dance, and then the gaze is on literally people who may not realize that that's what they're doing, but they are putting themselves forward as the wise saviors of the world. For us in the Stop the Manganese campaign in the MISCO, and also in XRISN, what we have insisted upon is a recognition of where the power that can effectively counteract the power of the extractivist establishment is. And for us, that power really is within communities of resistance in the global south. That is the majority of humanity. And that connected with the power of communities of resistance in the global north could be, the force for being the change transformation of our world. And imagine if instead of throwing ourselves at, governments to start with, trying to compel them, to make the change, right? We concentrated most of that energy, right, on building relationships with other popular forces of power across the world, so that, with a very strongly interconnected force for global change, we can demonstrate to each other that we ourselves are the change, and that, you know, that power, when it rises globally through its local interconnectedness, you know, can prove beyond doubt to ourselves and to everybody else that change has to happen, and we are making that change. And that is why, in being the change, we pay a lot of attention to how we can bring into visibility, particularly here in the global north, the immense power of resistance that expresses itself even in forms of resistance that we can't even imagine. Just recently, we had Marina Trix, one of our young activists, you know, returned from Mexico with immense stories of, you know, her experiences within communities of resistance, you know, facing death at every step along the way, but persisting in that resistance. And if only we devoted, you know, a significant part of our time and resources to building relationships through these, you know, kind of ambassadors that indigenous communities are now appointing and supporting to take their messages to other communities across the world. If we build that kind of power, you know, we will be amazed at the kind of transformation, you know, that unified people's power will bring about through our own efforts. And that is why it is important in everything that we do, you know, we recognize where the true power really is, and make every effort to globally interconnect that power so that we can convince ourselves, you know, about our own ability and capacity to be the change.
Thank you,
Oh.
Kofi. Thank you. Gail, 18 minutes behind schedule.
I
Go
hear
ahead.
you. So, Luke, I'm just getting a view. I'm just trying to change that. That's okay. Yeah. Wow. I mean, one of the things that makes teams amazing and bring out innovation and brilliance is when we're coming from very, very different perspectives. And that also takes some time to digest and to bring together in ways that we will find meaning together. And so this is a journey, folks, and this has been a trial run. I'm wanting to try and bring some of the concepts together in a way that may work for some people. I hope so. So maybe I'm just going to pause for a minute, just a moment of silence. There's been a lot said. So we've been talking about this incredible domination paradigm that's happened over thousands of years. It's urgent that we make change, and yet we haven't managed it yet. And so we have to think freshly about what to do. The domination paradigm, it pushes, it forces, and the master's tools doesn't dismantle the master's house. How do we pull? How do we attract? One way I talk about one love is the concept of magic source, the idea that there's this stuff in the universe that pulls us together. It showed up in many of the things that people have already said. And actually, there are sociologists that have theories about this. Emile Durkheim talks about collective effervescence when you feel it together on the streets.
evolutionary biologists are postulating that there must be some kind of hidden force in the universe that pulls us into collaboration to explain evolution. So what are the ingredients of magic source? There's that moment when you really, as Skeena was saying, you feel the vision, you can feel that it's possible. And you're based in wisdom. There's some deep knowing that you have, maybe from your history of resistance, maybe from something that your body's telling you. And there's agency, there's something that you know that you can actually do. You can do something. It's not something that you want to see happen, there's agency. And there's a sense of togetherness. You're not alone on this, you're doing it with other people. So those are the ingredients in Magic Source that create this pull, they pull us together. They're about needs being met, which is justice. It's about love in action. And other ingredients you might like to add in there is humor, service, beauty, humility. So this, what we're needing to do, what we're really trying to say, folks, is that we want to build this magic source up together. We want to build an attraction force that pulls us into connection together. And it's going to be, we'll know when we're doing it because it feels fun and it's regenerative. It feels a bit magic. We've had moments like that in Extinction Rebellion, by the way. We put a pink boat in the middle of Oxford Circus, and the boat in an action in itself was visionary. It was saying, nobody's coming to save us, we're going to save ourselves, and we're going to have fun and dance while we're doing it. Waterloo Bridge said that we want to be in communities together. We want to be with nature while we do this. We want to learn together. And so we felt something of an attraction energy, and people came, people just couldn't help themselves but join us. Next slide, please. In other words, from Rumi, there is a community of spirit. Join it and feel the delight of walking in the noisy street and being the noise. Next slide, please. So I talked earlier on about source fields. There's something that we set up that we can do together. That's an invitation. And how could we together be in an invitation of our global family to come together to repair and to resist at the same time? It's something about making this a really big invitation. And the vision that we're pulling together is one of repair, that we're here as a species to bring beauty and to repair together. And this speaks to what we were saying about power as well, that we're moving from this agitation, raising the alarm, to inspiring and uplifting with the vision, to orchestrating, to working together as a global family. And this is about power with, so we can go back to the network theory. How can we work and organize together? It's about learning together. You know, and the main things I always hear Kofi talking about is how we get to learn by doing. I know I'm a bit of a theorizer. And this naturally covers what Stellan Vint-Hagen said about social movement theory. It's got different parts to it so that we see and feel the pluriversal together. You know, it's that enactment of the vision together, that we make these global connections, that we have dialogue together. It's about communities of belonging. That's where this will come from. And so part of our invitation is to think about which communities you belong to and how you can enhance that sense of togetherness. Next slide, please. So I showed this model of a paradigm and the cultures and how it can be so negative with the reinforcing feedback loops of global finance, grabbing and extracting, and democracy being fake and all the rest of it. And when we look at this model as well, we can think, okay, but we have got agency within this. There are places that we sit within this, within our groups, within some of the things that are happening in the world, in which acts of repair are happening. It may be like a very individual level that you know, we're working to increase our knowledge, to repair the damage from the education system, to to support ourselves to feel well and healthy is how we repair the relationships between ourselves within our groups. We've got collaborative practices that we developed through the Systems Realignment Project that you can use in your groups to collaborate better together. We've got to learn how to do that. We can do co-liberation practices to repair the relationships, the places where we've been divided and ruled. There are ways that we can be in our communities that many people did with COVID, that went out and determinedly helped to meet people's needs. The enculturation system, we can be the media, we are being the media, that's already happening. The economic and regulatory system, we can be part of the repair there. We can localize economic systems, we can be part of food sovereignty. And I'm not suggesting we set up 1 million project seats, they're already happening, folks. And we can bring our growth as activist communities into places of repair and support and help them and be part of that. The trust the people piece, we can do local democracy, we can do repair there. We can think about global finance and there's cryptocurrencies and so on. Anyway, that we can do many things to be in repair of the land, rewilding. There's lots of ideas going to come forwards in the seed pod, folks. So next slide, please. So this would be some other, examples like supporting local cooperative economics, co-organizing of resistance, just very much acknowledging of the harm. And what we're speaking to here is this unifying of the people's power together. So if we come to the next slide. So what we would be intending to do then is, it comes back to that magic sourcing, it's the agency. Where in your group might you feel some agency? There's examples like, for example, your local council's declared a climate emergency, but it doesn't seem to be doing very much. There are things that could be happening around that are repair-based, like working with them to rewild patches of land, for example. But rather than just doing that in isolation, what we're saying, what we want to build through Being the Change are local links. So, maybe you're doing that work, I don't know, in some of that work's been happening in Stroud, and through the Rise, we're talking about maybe we'll be making connections to the Voltaire region in West Africa, and making another connection to repair-based, land-based work in Abya Yala. We can decide where we sit in this and what repairs we want to make together and make those links so that we start to feel ourselves in families. And I'm very much talking to the separation that has come with this whiteness paradigm. I've watched this in Extinction Rebellion, and it's very beautiful when it happens. What happens when the family reconnects? It's like the immune system, the body starts to feel itself and starts to learn. And so, for example, our internationalist youth solidarity, we're making links with the Maasai people. Again, it's Kofi's eldership showing up there. And when the Maasai people's land were under attack recently, the young folks who have made that relationship, they felt it in themselves. They felt that attack. It wasn't some sort of superficial thing that I've been involved in, retweeting something. And so that alarm can be raised to the rest of the network. Hey folks, something's happening here. And the amount of power that we build up is to do with the amount of magic source we've got together. We build up this unified people's power together. And through that, we'll work out how much power we have in order to stop harms. So sometimes what I understand is that in some parts of the world, just being supported to be visible with your struggle can be a way in which that harm can be prevented or minimized. So let's say again, the Rise in Stroud are connected to a part of West Africa, and there's an alert goes out and it goes through the network, and it's time to amplify folks. We're talking about an immune response. Look, it's complex, folks. We're trying to deal with a 5,000-year-old paradigm system, and I feel something possible here, so I'm very excited about it. We can repair eldership. There's so much that we can repair. So what you've heard, like, where do you feel it? What's yours to do, right? Of the repair, of the making the world, because we keep saying this in emergency, we've got this many years left, and of course it's degenerating, it has been for a long time. And if we're not focused on the repair, and we're just, as Kofi was saying, screaming at the government, if that's all we're going to be doing, then it's going to, in my estimation, carry on degenerating. This is about the rest of our lives, folks. Whatever comes with the tipping points, we've got to get together, we've got to matter to each other, we've got to have each other's backs. Next slide, please. So we're talking about coming together and being in a repair and connecting our acts of repair together in a visionary way. And it's not just about XR, there are groups all over the world. This is the cool news, folks, while we've been head down sort of freaking out about what's happening. That at the same time as the degeneration, the climate crisis is happening, there's an uplift. There's so much amazing stuff happening out in the world, you know, so much new knowledge, thinking, leaning into the old ways, the true ways, the new ways. So there's much to connect in with, but what we want to do is bring some of that repair work also into the resistance work, bring that together. And, you know, we're working with the idea of the immune system. I talked early on about fractals in nature, you know, things that happen at this body level could happen on the level of the whole planet. And the immune system, I'm just learning some things about it. It's a really incredible system. Our bodies don't get rid of foreign invaders. That's the colonial version of immunity. It's nonsense. Our body's made up of lots of different types of organisms. In fact, at a cellular level, we have mitochondria that are integrated bacteria. Like, we're an amazing, you know, model of cooperation already. And what the immune system does is it notices when there's damage and it acts to prevent the damage, and it acts to repair the damage. It stops the harm and it repairs the harm. Now, what would that look like globally if, as we build the connections between ourselves and we say, enough, you know, the Maasai are not going to lose their land, or, you know, the Adani coal mine that's going to have 10 times the carbon footprint in the UK, that's not happening on our watch, or that coal mines in Adovisi, or some lithium mines in West Africa, or the, you know, taking of the lands of indigenous people in Abya-Yala. Because of our fantastic ISN, you know, XR ISN works, we have connections now across the world. We have things to build upon. So how might we work together? Let me just sort of give you an example. I'm not saying it would definitely be like that, right? There's an immune flare-up. There's a thing that says something's going off here, folks, because there's relationship, right? And there's relationships that get built. And then different bits of the immune system can operate. If, for example, there are people, or there will be people on frontline resistance, we'll be, of course, asking what support is needed. Sometimes it may need some of us to go there. Sometimes it does help if there's white skin there, not always. You know, obviously we'll be in dialogue, but, you know, if those of us that are really willing to step forwards, that may be something that's wanted. Sometimes there's the idea that there's going to be jobs created by this mine or whatever's, you know, rip-offs happening. The international trade union movement may well be working locally, and we're, you know, great that we've got XR trade unions getting off the ground. There are some NGOs that are ones that we have respect for their work over time. Survival International would be an example. They've been good at helping bring legal actions. They might bring that bit of the immune system in. Sometimes there's ways to use the finance system against itself, short selling of shares. There might be that there will be communities that we've already created, you know, the Christian community in one country linked to another, and so on, forming different bits of support that's needed. Like, how do we help each other through those times? There are employees that are in some of the institutions that are part of the act of damage, but they're not necessarily wanting to be part of that. We can work with employee networks. XR catalyzers have done that kind of work as well. There can be digital targeting of the potential insurance companies. In the Adani coal mine example, the Money Rebellion have been working with market forces, and we've gone after 44 different insurance companies, given them hassle on like hell online, and they don't want to insure it, right? Some institutions are weak. So we'll learn together through dialogue, through these connections, through this localization about who we are. We start to believe in ourselves, because this is not about us helping some community somewhere. This is about, especially this type of European heritage, remembering our family, seeing that the other places have not got this paradigm quite so soaked in, and learning from that. It's not a transactional exchange, it's an exchange of humanness. So so that's that's what I want us to understand, folks. I know it's been a lot of 3 days of hard work and a lot to bring together. I will just mention in brief that there's something called Web 3.0 emerging right now as part of, in some ways, interesting things are happening there. You can do what's called open space technology. You can connect to people that you have something in common with. You can have massive global gatherings that the technology exists. There are good forms of cryptocurrencies that feel like they're emerging, that there's some way in which technologies can really hold feedback and learning. It's the immune system's all about learning, folks. It's all about that. So that's it. That's what I wanted to bring to this point, to where we've got to as a team. I hope that made some sense at the end of this long piece. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Thank you all that have spoken. So we're going to go into breakouts as a chance to digest and talk through some of this. We'll come back together as a big group at 5 past the hour, but also to take a little bit of time if you need it towards the end of that. I'll message you on the hour to suggest taking a break if you need to take a break for anything, but we'll come back into the main room at 5 past the hour. See you soon.
There'll be more of that kind of activity happening, but I in BCAN, as Cobiner was saying yesterday, we are just focused on what we think needs to happen. So we don't want to sort of impose something on XR UK, and maybe just to remind ourselves that the Hive made this invitation to Skeena and I as part of a sort of strategy thing in the autumn to think longer term. So maybe there'll be a place to, having practiced on you guys for the last few days, to try and, boil this down. Not that it can be boiled down, but you know what I mean, sort of maybe not need like 8 hours to explain it, and to talk with XR UK about this. But yeah, I'm rambling, I'm tired. Somebody do this to me when I've talked enough.
I'm just wondering about our BCAN team, and if there are others that have seen these questions and would like to respond, my love. So Esther, Cobiner, Kofi, and Robin, are you seeing these questions, and is there something there you'd like to respond to?
I'll jump in. Luke, maybe you could take the screen sharing off.
Yep, stop screen sharing.
And we can see each other a little bit. There's some questions coming through the chat about what is BCAN? Is BCAN an XR offshoot? Is it the strategy for XR, or what is it? And I don't know the answer to that. That's unresolved.
Well, I can attempt an answer to that.
Thanks, Kofi.
Go ahead, Kofi.
BCAN is it is the XR being the Change Affinity Network.
Exactly.
A space we are trying to create to draw those from within XR, but a lot more people who, for various reasons, cannot connect into XR, but would like to engage in work relevant to transformation that will involve all communities working together to tackle effectively to the benefit of all, not against anybody, the worldwide climate and ecological crisis. That is what Beacon is about. So it includes those of us who have come from various other backgrounds to do some work within Extinction Rebellion, and I've been trying to push in this direction. I've had, all kinds of checkered experiences, but also, people who, for example, within our Global South diasporan communities, for one reason or the other, feel that the way XR has operated and the kind of things it prioritizes, kind of excludes them from actively involving themselves, in its activities, but want a certain kind of relationship, so that the similar struggles, around these kinds of issues, but from their own perspective, from their own historical and contemporary experiences, can also be brought, into, creating this magic source, of one love, for us to be the change, not waiting for somebody to make change for us, but we ourselves, see ourselves as the power in this one love interconnectedness, making the change, and asserting our common humanity. That is, the kind of understanding some of us have of what Beacon is. And that's why we say it is an affinity network for all of us within and outside of XR who want to work as being the change in some relationship with XR, but not limited by XR.
Okay. I hope that answered some questions. I'm sure there are many more. In a few minutes, we'll do a little bit of a next steps and a closing. And at 1/2 the hour, we're going to show a brand new, it's just made in the last hour, 5-minute video that isn't available online, but we'll show it here. And so if you're able to stick around for that, then I invite you to stick around, and then the breakouts will be open again for unfacilitated space if you want to stay around afterwards. But now, just for the next few minutes, we're going to have a space. In fact, before we go there, let's just take a moment to come back into our breath. I'm going to turn the chat off again. So just adjust yourself in your seat, get comfortable, and then just take a few breaths and feel and notice your breath.
50 people have left out of the 200.
And notice your body. See what there's any sensations that are there. And we're going to have a few minutes now where just a few of us can share. And this is a space to share if your heart is racing and there's something that needs to be said. It's a space to share into words that you've never spoken before. If you're about to say something, you realize you've said this little soapbox before, this isn't the space for that. This is a space for new words and for new things. And we're just going to have 30 seconds for just a few voices to be heard. So if it's you, if your heart is racing, I invite you to unmute and speak into the space.
And please forgive me for muting you at 30 seconds if you do go over. It's just so everyone can have a voice.
Globally planned, regionally organized, locally executed planetary actions, a global general strike, hashtag sit down strike. That's it.
The floor is open.
My white middle class guilt has turned into the love of humanity and a chance to do something about it.
Just feeling so much love for you and all your work and coming together. God is love through connection. Selflessness is love. And you've given so much. Thank you.
The moment is now. This is our moment. Thank you.
Let's really empower youth. If youth are the fire, give them resources, put them center stage. I believe in youth. I want to be guided by youth.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Youth is represented by fire makes me want to say grandmothers represented by watersheds. You know, and youth together with grandmothers makes a watershed because it has no borders. We all stand upon watersheds regardless of where we are, as well as we all stand upon a magma core at the earth as well. We all stand the same distance from those things, you know, in a way. We are all the same distance from those two powers of powerful elements.
One tiny little blue dot in space that we all live on.
Can I just advocate for more female voices, please?
Okay, then. It's not just about political action, it's about being, and it's about digesting, processing, and taking that change into every little thing we do. So it's not just simply about occupying a street or going into an action. It's about how we are. So it becomes really a philosophy of life and for life.
After you, Belle.
I was just going to say, I'm sitting here with a view down the little valley in Cymru, and there's a whole network of beings out there waiting for us to listen. And it's just there, the birds are singing, and can we hear them? And Earth is waiting for us to listen to what. So our thinking about what the strategy is needs to be informed by what Earth wants us to be, because she made us and we're for her. So that's what Mountain's saying right now.
I wish I'd understood more than I have of this, but I'm very pleased that I'm here.
This is basically my favorite part of the whole 3-day workshop, and the only bit that's made me cry after being behind screens so much and apps and things and building slides. This is like the bit that most makes me come alive, is like hearing a collective voice, and I kind of feel like that's what this is all about.
I'd like to just speak up for imagination. I think imagination is crushed in this society, and through our education systems and everything. And we're going to need a lot more imagination to actually come up with a very strong, powerful, beautiful vision that's right for what we need. So, anyone who has the time to give themselves space to just imagine, let their mind run free, help children to do that. I think it's so important.
What about if we're Earth's forward-moving imagination, not her immune system, and we're here to imagine in what she wants us to be?
Let's just have two more.
I'd like to say I'd prefer to spend my energy on convincing people who are open to learning than trying to waste my energy banging my head against a wall where nobody's listening.
Go on.
We have to be the example that we want to see happen. We have to actually communicate by our actions, our thoughts, our speech, our overall communication. We have to represent what will come by the watershed of people.
Looking forward to the growth and spread of these ideas.
Okay, thank you, people. Thank you for your beautiful thoughts. So these are just a few ideas now, some warm-up dance moves of things that you could take away to do in the next weeks. To take the feelings and the ideas back to your group and your community and have discussions. Engage with the seed pod, see what's there, read up, watch things, share things with others that you've gained from, and then come back to us. We're going to have a fourth session. We'll send the info soon. It will hopefully be in 2 or 3 weeks' time. We've decided today that we needed a fourth session. We want to listen to you. We want to have these conversations. We didn't fit in what we wanted to in this. And so we want more, and we'll let you know about that when it's happening. And now I pass, I think, to Skeena to close us.
I'm deeply moved by all the sharing. And in honor of this work that we have been cultivating and are co-creating and co-sensing, I wrote this a few days ago as a love song to the Great Mother. It's a deep prayer. Beloved and beautiful one, our daughter of the galaxy, our Mother Earth, our sister outsider, our sacred woman, our holy girl, crucible of love and fire of truth. You call us, and we're coming. We give thanks that you answer our call every day. You descend on the wings of separation, the wings of connection, lifting your joy and vitality. You flow through your waters and rise through your roots, giving new life and memory, shelter and refuge. You enter through the cry of the next 7 generations. You give with unconditional generosity and demand protection for the vulnerable. You teach us to live in this way. Thank you. Even as we become awed by your beautiful body, even as we wonder at your power of being, you make us beautiful. You bless your creation with the seeds of becoming more beautiful. We feel your divine presence. Thank you. Have you felt in exile? It is too heartbreaking to leave you. We are remembering you. We offer ourselves as your loving children, becoming stewards of your preciousness, your beloved disciples, your radiant reflections, our sacred selves as one. Thank you with love. Thank you with love. Thank you with love. In your abundance, we give abundant thanks with love. Thank you, everybody, for coming to these days with us and all the time you've given. I've got the children's fire here. That prayer of being led by our young ones, surrendering to that wisdom of that call of the next 7 generations. May we come into our one being for our one love for that. Thank you so, so much. I'm going to blow out on 3. 1, 2, 3.